Good. Hello, I'm Scott Green, and welcome to our webinar, Keeping Your Customers Happy and Avoiding Litigation. I mean, those are two worthy goals. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the managing partner of the Green Law Group. I've been practicing construction law primarily since 1978, so a long time. So I've seen a lot of train wrecks in my years, and I've seen a lot of great success stories. So I'm going to try to share with you some of the things that I think might help you keep customers happy and avoid litigation. So we've got a bunch of sponsors. I want to thank all of them. These people are here because they're also allies in the construction industry, and you might find them useful as well. Fair warning, I'm not going to be talking about anybody's specific legal situation. So for any particular problems you've got, you need advice based upon the facts and law concerning your situation, and not just general information I'm going to give you today. Here's about our firm. We basically were built for the construction industry. And as our clients grew, we added additional practice areas to accommodate them. Here's our good-looking group of lawyers. Altogether, we're about 20 people, including paralegals and administrators. And I think we're actually going to add a couple of lawyers this year. Okay, here we go. Find your niche. So what do I mean about that? I mean, you've got to be passionate about what you do to survive in the construction industry. It's a challenging industry. It's certainly an industry that offers plenty of rewards. But if you're not, passionate about what you do, it's going to be difficult to survive the ups and downs. Can't be doing this just for the money. You can make good money. I've seen plenty of contractors who are exceptionally successful. But it can't be just about the money. You've got to want to deliver something, some product that makes you proud and that you're passionate about. In addition to that, I want you to think about it, not whether, but what is your competitive advantage? What makes you different and better from your competition? What can you, emphasize that's going to produce more success, more satisfied customers? For me, as an example, when I was trying to figure out, well, what practice areas do I want to engage in as an attorney? When I first started out, I was doing a little bit of everything. And quite frankly, it was overwhelming to try to, do a divorce one day and a will another day and a drunk driving another day. And I thought, man, this is just too much. I've got to cut this down. And then it eventually dawned on me that I had a background in construction. I grew up in construction. My dad was a contractor. His dad was a contractor. My uncles were contractors. I contracted to get through law school. So I started focusing on that. And what I discovered fairly quickly was that while, I might be dealing with attorneys that went to much better schools and maybe even had much better skill sets than I did, when we were in court dealing with construction issues, I could often run rings around them because I knew the business. I knew the day-to-day. I had run a company, and that gave me an advantage. So I've been riding that pony for a long time. So figure out what your competitive advantage is and, double down on that. And then I think, unfortunately, there are something that's true about the construction business is you're always dealing with competitive bids. People complain loudly about the cost of construction, and it is expensive. But the odd thing is, the irony is, it's expensive, but you're always bidding for work. So in my experience, there are very few fat jobs out there. You've got, when you're up against the competition, you're constantly looking for ways to do it faster, do it better, do it cheaper than anybody else. And, that's just the way that It's always been in my experience, and I imagine it might be the same for you. So, taking all these things into account, you want to review your business model every once in a while and think about, all right, what's your plan? Why are you doing this? How are you going to build? Is it scalable? And by scalable, for instance, maybe you've got a specialty like I'm just going to pull something out here. You build Jack in the Box restaurants, and so you do that all over Southern California or all over the country. It's possible, and then you just get better and better and better at it because you can once you have your model down, you can get more efficient and more profitable going forward, doing that over and over and over again. That's one model. That's not the only model, but I think it makes my point about finding something you can scale. Okay, now you've got your business niche, you've got your business model. How are you going to tell the world about it? You have to market. Now, the best marketing is referral. And referrals will come based upon your reputation and the work you do out there in the field, but you've still got to get out there, let the world know about you. So websites, being incorporated, a lot of advantages to getting incorporated for your image, how professional you are, but also on a practical legal side, you want to incorporate your business because you want to separate your personal property and assets from potential business liabilities. If you're not incorporated and you get into a project that really goes south, you're putting all of your personal assets at risk because if they sue you, come after you for substantial damages, and they prevail, whoever it is, they're going to execute on a judgment against you by taking your property. Now, if you're incorporated, the corporation is a firewall that shields your personal property from liability. So if you're not incorporated, that's something you want to talk to your CPA about, talk to your lawyer about, and if you have personal assets to protect, you want to move forward on that. Now, one very important thing, when you incorporate, you've got to get a separate contractor's license for your corporation. It's not a difficult thing. It's a paperwork thing. If you have a license, you can act as a qualifier for your corporation, so your corporation can get a license. You can transfer your personal license over to your corporation, but you've got to go through this process with the Contractor State License Board. Make sure you're incorporated. Can't do any work in this business without a contractor's license. And if you do, and you get caught, you're in big trouble. You have to give back all the money, or you can be compelled to give back all the money you've made, and you can be subject to even criminal penalties. So making sure you're properly licensed, always significant, top of the list in terms of importance. Now, one thing that is commonly missed, and it could get you in trouble with a Contractor State License Board in the event somebody makes a complaint about you, is your license number is supposed to be on all your written material, particularly your marketing material. So when contractors contact me about working with them, I frequently look them up, see what they've got online, and it's actually fairly unusual to see somebody who's actually put their license number on their website. But it should be. It should be. Now these other things, answer your phone, etc. Make sure you're returning text and emails promptly. That's just good common sense. I remember hearing, years and years ago that doctors who have a great bedside manner are sued for malpractice at a much lower rate than doctors who don't. And I think that really translates into pretty much any business. If you develop a good relationship with your client really appreciates your communication with them, keeping them informed, letting them know when changes have occurred, and in construction, keeping a clean, job site. When there is a problem, much more likely, that your customer is going to try to sort it out with you because they've developed a relationship and a trust in you. So that's, I think, critically important. Now, know the rules, play by the rules. In my career, I've seen all kinds of efforts to cut corners in construction. I understand the pressure to make a buck. And since you're in this competitive environment where typically you have multiple bidders and everybody knows what they're doing, the bids come in within a fairly tight range, maybe a 5 to 10% difference or spread in the bids. So there's a temptation to cut corners. One of the worst corner cutting, efforts that I see far too often would be contractors who are not paying all of their people on payroll and then not reporting all of their payroll to their work comp carrier. Both of those things, are going to prevent you from getting a good night's sleep. And if you can't run your business without cutting corners so that you can put your head on the pillow at night and not worry about, somebody coming after you because, when you're cutting a corner, it's not going to be a secret. For instance, if you're not paying all your employees on payroll, they know. And if you get in a sideways dispute with a client and they get their attorney involved, what attorneys do is they request all of the paperwork involved in a project and they start going over it with a fine-tooth comb. And so if an attorney suspects that you're not paying your workers' comp correctly, they're going to subpoena records from you and from your work comp carrier. And they're going to match those things up. And so if you haven't been reporting all of your work comp correctly, you've been cheating, and a lawyer finds that out, now they've got a sledgehammer to hit you over the head with. Because in California, if you cheat on your work comp, it can result in your contractor's license being retroactively suspended back to the point where you should have but didn't have workers' comp. And then if your license is retroactively suspended, that means you're performing work without a license. And when you perform work in California without a license, you're violating a bunch of laws and you have to give the money back, all of the money. So let's say you did $1 million project and you spent $250,000 on materials, but you're now subject to this disgorgement because you were cheating and you got caught. You got to give $1 million back, even the cost you got for materials. So don't cut corners. And by the way, a biggie is if you hire unlicensed subcontractors, the law automatically considers those folks to be your employees. Well, what does that mean? You're responsible for their making sure that they're compensated in accordance with wage and hour laws. What do I mean by wage and hour laws? The main thing is when people work over 8 hours in a day or over 40 in a week, you got to give them overtime. Everybody's got to have a work-free half an hour break for lunch within the first 6 hours of the day. They got to have 10-minute breaks, morning and afternoon. Those are just the highlights. You should have an employee handbook that drills down on a lot of these things. And so if you're not staying on top of that, then you're likely going to step into a legal pitfall that could be extremely expensive. So unlicensed subs, don't go there. Not worth it. Big exposure liability. Contracts. Let's be honest. I mean, nobody gets into the construction business because they love paperwork. I'm a lawyer. I don't love paperwork. Who loves paperwork? Nobody. But is it important? Heck yes. In the construction industry, it's at least as important as doing the work, the ability to do good work. I mean, you can do great work. Your paperwork sucks, you're not going to stay in business. And, central to the paperwork is the contract. What is a contract? It's a written document that explains who bears the risk for performance and when something goes wrong. Who bears the risk? So keeping that in mind, do you want to make sure you've got a contract that is written to maybe shield you for some risk? Or do you want to make sure that you read and review and understand contracts and key provisions before you sign a contract? One of the things that I see that some larger, more sophisticated general contractors are doing vis-a-vis their subcontractors is their contracts do not contain a provision for the recovery of attorney's fees in the event of a dispute. And, at first, glance, you might think, well, that's kind of odd. The general contractors, usually have more muscle, more financial heft, and they have better paperwork. So in a dispute with a subcontractor, they already have an advantage. Their contracts are going to be written in a manner that they're going to push as much risk off to the subs as possible. So why wouldn't they want to have the ability to recover their attorney's fees in the event they, have to go legal with the sub? Well, here's the reason. Let's say you finish a big job and your retention final payment is $250,000. And you dial everything in, you were great on the job, you have no delays, your performance was exceptional, all your paperwork's in, and you're trying to get your last payment and you're not getting it. It's not coming. You're following up diligently, you provided releases, you've asked if there's anything else they need, you're not getting paid. And then somebody contacts you from the GC's office and says, well, yeah, we had some problems on this project. Things went sideways with the owner. They're not happy. And, there's a financial crunch now. Instead of $250,000, how about 75,000? And you think, are you freaking kidding? I'm owed $250,000. So you call me or any other competent construction attorney and you say, hey, look, what do I do? Well, the traditional path is if you've done a preliminary notice, and hopefully you have, then you can record a lien on the project. You can file a lawsuit for breach to enforce the lien, and you can go down this road of litigation, and at the end of that road, get paid or get a win. Now, how long is that road? Could be a year or more. And what is it going to cost you in terms of attorney's fees and court costs to prepare this lawsuit, file all the parties, probably go through mediation, answer discovery, maybe take depositions, maybe have your deposition taken, maybe go to a mandatory settlement conference, maybe even have to go all the way through a jury trial. What could it cost? It could easily cost, and I hope you're sitting down, and I apologize for this, $250,000, the same amount you're owed. So if your contract doesn't include a provision where the prevailing party in a dispute is entitled to recover their attorney's fees, guess what? You might win, but if it cost you $250,000, you're not getting that back. So did you win? No. And so the big contractors know this. So when you're going through a contract and you notice, hey, there's no ability to recover attorney's fees. If I sue them, I win, I don't get my fees back. Why did they leave that out? Because leaving it out gives them a lot of leverage to force you to take a haircut at the end of the job. So when you come and say, hey, I want my $250,000, and they give you whatever BS excuse they give you, and you go see a lawyer, The only guarantee you get from me or any other attorney is, hey, until this matter is resolved, you get a bill every month because we got to work. That's what we do. And what's our work look like? A lot of paperwork. And we're writing to, opposing counsel. We're doing discovery. We're drafting motions and complaints, and we bill by the hour. And hourly fees are expensive. And so at the beginning of your projects, when you're reading a contract, you've got to identify those things which are risks that are shifted to you and take that into account. So if there's no attorney fee provision in the contract, the risk of carrying attorney's fees to sue to get your money squarely on your shoulders. All right, so this is just an example. You'll get better at identifying these things as you read more contracts and you get more savvy about it. Another one that you absolutely have to look out for is language in a contract that talks about, in the event of a dispute, the parties, you, have to continue working. What does that mean? Well, what could the dispute be? Well, maybe the dispute is they didn't pay you. So maybe you're 150 into $1 million contract, you're not getting paid. And you think, okay, I'm going to stop working. Well, your contract says you can't. Your contract says when there's a dispute, you got to resolve that later on down the road. But in the meantime, you cannot delay progress on the project. You have to keep going. Boy, to me, that's a deal breaker. I look for that one and I think, no, we got to put some balance into that provision. So I would negotiate for, an agreement that, sure, we'll keep working as long as payments keep flowing. But you can't stop making progress payments and expect me to continue to work to the end of the project. I can't finance this job. So you got to read your contracts. You got to be really good about that. So I, put some quick notes here about what are the big provisions. But, you might get a contract on a project that looks like a little phone book. And there's just no way around reading it. If you send it to me and you say, hey, Scott, got this contract, take a look at it, please. Well, I can look at it and I can pull out a few things, but that's no substitution for you reading it, because you know what you've got in the project. You know what you've accounted for in terms of risk, profit, and if you don't read it and make those calculations, your lawyer certainly can't make them. And if you want to be efficient and save money on your lawyer, you don't give me a 40-page contract and just ask me to read it. You give me a contract that perhaps you've read yourself, you've circled provisions that you have questions about. You say, hey, Scott, take a look at this, and in particular, the areas I've highlighted, so we can chat about that. That's going to be much more efficient. Okay, now with contracts, the other thing to know is, one contract doesn't fit all projects. There's a variety of situations. For instance, if you're doing home improvement work, you're doing residential work, the law in home improvement contracts, real specific. Home improvement contracts got to be about 12 pages long, just based on all the disclaimers and information you have to give to homeowners, because the state of California protects homeowners in these situations, not contractors. And their method for protecting homeowners is to make sure the contracts have a lot of provisions in there that are good for homeowners, not good for contractors. So for instance, there's a limitation on the down payment. You can't get more than $1,000 or 10%, whichever is less, in a home improvement contract. So if you start a project and say, hey, I need 50% down so I can go get the cabinets, that's a violation of law. Now, if you don't know that and you're doing that and you get sideways with the homeowner has, an ally that you don't have. It's the Contractor State License Board, and also your license bond. Because the homeowner can go to the license board, file a complaint against you. The license board's going to say, all right, give us a contract. We could take a look at it, see if it complies with all of the specific requirements. And if it doesn't, you're already behind the 8 ball. And then if you were front loading costs, hey, they really frown on that. And heck, don't ever abandon the project. So you get sideways with a homeowner, do whatever you can to finish that job, because walking off the job over a payment dispute, that's not going to go well. And don't do anything like that without talking to your lawyer. And of course, contracts change on a regular basis. You might have had a contract you've been using, or you might have one you've been using for 10 years. And it's like, oh, well, it's okay. It's been working so far. Well, maybe it's been working so far because, to your credit, you haven't had any disputes. But you really don't know if that contract is serving your interest until you get sideways and lawyers get involved. That's the point at which, one side or the other is going to educate you about, what you missed, or, what that contract really means. So, you should have your contracts reviewed by an attorney, construction law attorney. I don't know, annually is not a bad idea. And also sitting down with your staff and saying, okay, let's look at the provisions. Do we have the right exclusions? Your lawyer's not going to know about exclusions. The lawyer's not going to know, he's not going to have your experience on the job to know, which things you want to make sure are not within your scope of work. You got to educate your lawyer on that. And I threw in a comment about DocuSign. With home improvement contracts, or really anything when you're, well, largely with residential contracts, I think it's very appropriate there. It makes for a smoother contracting, procedures, if you will. Everybody has electronic copies. And by the way, I think when you set up DocuSign, contracts get signed and a little more quickly, and they don't get reviewed as carefully because people are looking on their phone, and it's like, oh yeah, click, 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 click. Oh yeah, here it is. So check out DocuSign. Project management. That's a biggie. I've seen a lot of things go sideways during the course of a project. If you've been doing this for any length of time, you know all about that. So, managing your project is, a very important key to success. So in this day and age, are you going to, turn a blind eye to construction management tools that are out there, software that's out there? If you do, I think that's you missing an opportunity. I don't know, depending on the size of your business, you might not be large enough to warrant it. But if you're doing, I don't know, let's say 25 projects a year, or you're doing north of $1 million a year, you can probably benefit from some more efficiency in the handling of your paperwork, managing schedules, keeping all of your change orders organized on a project basis, doing cost accounting, putting up, making something like a construction project website available to your client, so that instead of getting calls at 10 o'clock at night from your client about, well, is anybody showing up tomorrow, they can look at the project website and see what the schedule is for the next day. So if you haven't thought about it, check it out. At the end of this presentation, there are some references to companies you could check out. This gets me into what I call the administrative side of the business. And what is that? That's your office staff. I often find that, the administrative side of a construction business is under-resourced. What does that end up doing? It means that, you've undervalued the paperwork. You've undervalued the, people that get the billing out, the people that make sure your insurance is paid and maintained, the people that make sure that you're complying with all of the Cal OSHA safety requirements, people that answer your phone. That, part of the business, is the oil that, greases the skids and makes the thing flow so that you can be out in the field, if that's your forte, making sure that the projects are running smoothly. But you got to have a good administrative side. Good folks in the office make a huge difference. Now, job costing, if you're not doing job costing, then you're just crossing your fingers and hope that everything ends up with money in your pocket at the end of the project. If you use job costing, you can figure out mid-project, are you on course to make a buck or not? Without job costing, you're just guessing. Also, invest in your employees, safety training, technical competence, etc. I would add, you want to give people a career path. If you've got people, you got a good group of folks working for you. Make sure you sit down with them on a regular basis, talk about what they think about their careers going forward. How can you help them? In the construction business, what can happen is you can end up training a lot of people to go out and get your own contractor's license. You can't really avoid that, but the smarter and better your people are at what they do for you, the better you look. And so, and people are going to like working for you if there's training and education involved in the job. Now, checklists. I think the book I read years ago, I was going to check this out and I forgot, but I think it's the Checklist Manifesto is the name of the book that really opened my eyes to the usefulness of checklists. Might seem like a basic concept, but it and it is. And there's a way to kind of make it work in your business. For instance, I was driving in this morning thinking about maybe some examples I might have for you on this, and I thought back in the home improvement business, how useful would it be to give your clients a checklist for the things that are going to happen before their progress payment is due, so that they know, okay, let's say a pool's going in, and you've got to have a soils test, and the grader's going to come in. They're going to dig a big hole. They're going to knock down a wall for access, and then they're going to, set some rebar, etc. Giving the client a checklist, which also mirrors something that your project person is using, might help things go smoothly, and might help avoid things falling through the cracks. I think that the more information you give your clients about how the project is going to unfold, the more educated they are about it, the less they're going to be calling you in the middle of the night saying, hey, what's next? And it deepens their your relationship with them and their trust in you. So you could have a set of tear sheets, of checklists, that you could give your folks, give your clients. That could go a long way toward developing a nice reputation for being a really dialed in contractor. That could be something that's your competitive advantage. You can turn paperwork and all that part of the business into something that is the mainstay of your company, and supports the value that you bring to projects and to your customers. And then I say share information with your folks. What good does it do if you've got a dialed-in contract and you've got a scope of work is clearly defined, and then the owner is chatting with your lead person on the job, and the owner's asking your lead person, hey, you know what, why don't you do X, Y, Z? And the lead person doesn't really know if that's within the scope or not. And all of a sudden, they're doing work outside the scope of your contract. And then you're in a position we're trying to bill for something that wasn't approved with a signed change order in advance of the work being performed, because your lead person didn't realize that that was he was being asked to do something that wasn't part of the job. Just an example. So you gotta push information down the chain, so that people working for you when you're not there on the project understand what the project's all about. That's another reason, construction management software could be helpful. And of course, use written change orders. And by the way, a change order is not just about price. It's also about scheduling changes. In home improvement work, for instance, you've got to tell people when you're going to start, when you're going to finish. And somebody comes along and says, I'd like to add, significantly the scope of work. And you say, okay, great. And you have a change order and it's just the price, but it's not the schedule. Well, the homeowner is entitled to assume that, gee, you're going to get this extra work done and the schedule hasn't changed. And if in fact it takes longer because there's more work, but you didn't address that in the change order, you could have a problem. So it's not just price, it's also schedule. Okay, honoring commitments. I mean, this speaks for itself, right? You want to make sure that, people have trust in you. And so, I mean, sometimes that means you're going to make perhaps a commitment that's not in your contract. I recently, did some work at my house and used a client, great guy, did a fantastic job. But sometimes we would have a conversation about something and he'd make a commitment to me and neither one of us are looking at the contract. But at the end of the day, I'm saying, oh, gee, I didn't get X. And then maybe his office person would say, well, with the contract, X is not in there. And I'd say, well, yeah, but wait a minute. I talked to so-and-so and they said I was going to get X. Well, I got X, because that was a good business decision for my contractor. And in return, I think I made life pretty nice for the contractor as well. But those side comments you make can modify your contract. And so if it's something of significance, you want to paper it. And I don't care if you paper it in a text or an email. That's better than nothing. So, making those commitments, write them down, make sure both sides have it, understand it. If there's a misunderstanding, as a contractor, you got to bend over backwards to try to resolve that and avoid disputes. And it's another one of these things that explains itself, but it's just amazing how often we get involved in disputes where there's no schedule. So, we've got one now where a homeowner owns a very expensive piece of property, $5-6 million piece of property, and they got sideways with contractor. Part of the dispute is, project's not complete. There have been some changes, I think minor changes, but there's no schedule. So whose fault is that? It's not the homeowner's fault. It's the contractor. So you're probably familiar with a critical path schedule, which has key deadlines on it that you got to hit these milestones before you get to completion. And when something comes up, like weather, for instance, if we have unusually bad weather that prevents you from performing, and by that I mean it's got to be unanticipated. So normal weather patterns are kind of baked into the contract. So if you're doing a project in rainy season and it rains, you can't go, oh my God, it rained, we need extra days. No, you should have figured that out going in. But if it rains, significantly beyond historical norms, well, then you can get an extension of time. And when that happens, you've got to adjust the contract. You've got to adjust the schedule, so that as changes occur, the schedule's modified, the schedule's circulated to everybody that needs to be in the know, including the property owner. And you want an acknowledgement back from key key participants that they got the amended schedule, and they, are able to comply and let you know if they have any questions. So manage that schedule. That's one of the most important things is, staying on schedule, getting a project done. If you do everything else well, but you're 6 months late, that you're not getting referrals from that party. All right, so as promised, here are some sample construction management companies. Check them out if you're interested. And, I hope I've given you at least some information you can take into your business and use it. If you have any questions, certainly send me an email, scott@thegreenlawgroup.com. Let me know you attended the seminar, and I'll be happy to chat with you and see if I can help you further. Good luck. Go out there and make a buck. See you next time.